She was my best friend for 11 years, the one who held my hand in the hospital waiting room the night my father died, the one who knew my coffee order, my childhood nickname, my passwords, and my biggest dream, a dream I only ever told one person on this entire earth. She used all three of those things to take it from me. But this isn't a story about betrayal. Not really. This is a story about what happens when someone tries to take the one thing you built with your own two hands, and instead of breaking you, it forces you to build something 10 times bigger than either of you ever imagined. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to understand 3 things. Why did the one person who knew my idea inside and out become the one person I couldn't trust with it? What was the one mistake I made, the one thing I should have protected, that let this happen in the first place? And when I finally saw her again, face to face, after everything, why did I thank her? Keep those 3 questions in your mind. I promise you, every single one gets answered. But to understand the ending, you have to understand how it began. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. My name is Maya Bennett. And when I was 18 years old, I walked into a college dorm room with 2 suitcases, a box of my mother's homemade shea butter, and absolutely no idea that the girl unpacking on the other side of that room was about to become the most important relationship of my adult life. Her name was Odalise. Everyone called her Dessa. She was tall, effortlessly put together even in sweatpants, the kind of person who walked into a room and the room just noticed her. I was quiet, observant, the kind of person who noticed everything but said very little. We should not have worked as friends, and yet, somehow, within the first 2 weeks, we were inseparable. I remember one of our first real conversations like it happened yesterday. She caught the smell of the shea butter blend my mother made, the one she'd been perfecting since I was a little girl, because nothing in the drugstore ever worked right for our skin, and she got so excited about it. She asked me why something like that wasn't already its own brand. I laughed and told her we simply didn't have the money for anything like that. She just looked at me and said, "Yet." I didn't know that tiny conversation, on a random Tuesday night in a dorm room that smelled like vanilla candles and stress, was the actual seed of everything that would happen years later. Over the next 4 years, Dessa became the sister I never had. She came from money, old money, private school money, but underneath all of it, she once told me she felt invisible in her own family, like she was just another line item in her parents' very organized, very cold life. I came from the opposite. My mom raised me alone, worked 3 jobs at one point, and always told me, "Baby, we don't have a safety net, so you have to build your own." There was a night, sophomore year, when I was on the phone with my mom, crying about a relationship that wasn't treating me right. I didn't even hear Dessa come in. She just sat down next to me, took the phone gently out of my hand, and told my mother she had me, that she'd take care of it, and my mom could go to bed. Then she made me tea I never asked for and stayed up with me until 2 in the morning so I wouldn't be alone. 2 years later, I did the same for her. Her parents finalized their divorce the spring of our junior year, and I stood outside that courthouse with her while she fell apart over 26 years, just ending like that. I told her I wasn't going anywhere, and I meant it. By the time we graduated, we had a running joke, half promise, that we made 100 times over cheap wine and late-night pizza. Whichever one of us made it first, actually made it, we'd bring the other one with us. We even pinky promised it, like we were 12 years old. I know how that sounds now, but at the time, it was the realest promise I had ever made to anyone. By the time we were in our mid-20s, I had turned my mother's kitchen table shea butter recipes into something real. Not a business yet, just notebooks, spreadsheets, sample jars in my apartment, and a dream so specific I could describe it in my sleep. A clean, affordable skincare line made specifically for melanin-rich skin. Real formulas, real ingredients. A brand that made women who looked like my mother and me feel like they weren't an afterthought in the beauty aisle. I told Dessa everything. I remember one particular afternoon at our usual coffee shop, laying it all out for her, the brand name I kept coming back to, the exact ratio for the Shea and Marula blend, the supplier my mother had been talking to for years, and the full business plan, investor deck and all. She scrolled through everything, genuinely impressed, and told me it was really good. Actually good. I told her she was the only person who had seen all of it. Every piece. She promised me she wasn't going anywhere, and that she meant it. Whatever I needed. I want you to really sit with that moment for a second. Because everything I'm about to tell you, every twist, every betrayal, started right there, with one moment of complete, unguarded trust. I didn't just tell Dessa my idea. I handed her the blueprint. Here's something nobody tells you about betrayal. It almost never starts with a dramatic villain moment. It starts small. It starts reasonable. It starts with a favor. I was self-funding everything at this point. Every jar, every label, every supplier deposit came out of my own savings. And when the money got tight, I did the things so many of us do when we're overwhelmed and exhausted. I asked my best friend for help. I told her I couldn't even make sense of half of my own spreadsheets, and that her family basically spoke finance as a second language. I asked if she could just help me organize the investor outreach, just until I found my footing. She said of course, and told me not to worry about it, that it was what she was there for. I want to be honest with you. Asking her that felt like the most natural thing in the world. She was smart. She was connected. She loved me. Why wouldn't I let her in? But slowly, something started to shift. Dessa started taking meetings I wasn't invited to. I'd catch pieces of phone calls from another room, her telling someone she had it handled, and that she'd loop me in, once there were real numbers. No point overwhelming me right now. At the time, I told myself she was protecting my energy, being a good friend, taking things off my plate. One night, I was searching my inbox for an old supplier quote, and I stumbled onto a forwarded email thread. Dessa, talking to a manufacturer, using language that sounded exactly like my own pitch deck. Almost word for word. I stared at that screen for a long moment. I brought it up with her, carefully, almost apologetically, the way you do when you don't actually want the answer to be bad. I asked if she'd been sending my materials to that manufacturer in Ohio. She laughed it off, told me she was just trying to get a comparison quote so she could surprise me with better pricing. She said, "Great minds think alike." And I believed her. Because why wouldn't I? This was Dessa. This was the girl who held my hand in a hospital waiting room. This was the girl I pinky promised my future to. Then life did what life does. It interrupted everything. My mother got sick. Nothing I'm going to go into detail about here, out of respect for her, but it was serious enough that I had to step back from the business completely for 6 weeks. No meetings, no emails, just hospital rooms, medication schedules, and holding my mother's hand the same way Dessa once held mine. Before I stepped away, I handed Dessa a folder and a set of keys and asked her to just keep the lights on, to handle whatever came up. I told her I trusted her. She promised me she had it, that I should go be with my mom and not worry about a thing. I want you to remember that word, promise. Because 6 weeks later, when I finally came back, everything had changed. I came back from caring for my mother, expecting to pick up exactly where I left off. Instead, I opened Instagram one evening, scrolling mindlessly, decompressing after weeks of hospital chairs and vending machine coffee, and there it was. A launch post, professional photography, a press release, a brand name unsettlingly close to the one I had spent years developing. My formulas, not similar, identical, reformulated just enough to avoid an exact match, and funded by the exact investor I had been chasing, unsuccessfully, for over a year. Founded by Odalis Kane. I read that caption 3 times before it actually landed. Before my body understood what my eyes were seeing, I called her immediately, and we ended up sitting across from each other at a quiet coffee shop. I asked her to explain it to me, because I was trying so hard, in that moment, to find a version of this that made sense. She stayed calm, almost rehearsed. She told me she'd just moved faster, that I was gone, the window was closing, and she already had the connections, the capital access, and the relationship with the manufacturer. I told her it was because I had given her all of that. She said I should be flattered, honestly, that she believed in the idea enough to actually build it herself, and that not everyone gets that. I sat across from the person I had loved for 11 years and realized, in real time, that she had already decided this was okay. She wasn't going to apologize. She had built an entire justification in her head, brick by brick, probably long before I ever found out. It got worse. When I went back through old documents, timestamps, filing records, I found something that broke something in me permanently. Dessa had filed the trademark, bought the domain names, registered the LLC. During the exact 6 weeks my mother was in the hospital. She didn't stumble into this. She had been building it quietly, deliberately, while I was holding my mother's hand and asking her to just keep the lights on. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I handled the next few weeks gracefully. I didn't. I isolated myself. I stopped answering texts from mutual friends who didn't know what to say. Night after night, I watched a brand built on my own blueprint grow followers, grow press mentions, grow a life of its own, while I felt completely erased from something I had built out of nothing. There's a specific kind of grief that comes with this type of betrayal. It's not just losing an idea. It's losing the version of the world where the people closest to you would never do something like this. That was my rock bottom. And I promise you, it gets better from here. But I needed you to sit in that low point with me for a second, because you can't understand how far I climbed without understanding how far down I actually was. About 3 weeks into what I can only describe as a genuine depression, I was sitting at my mother's hospital bedside. She was recovering, thankfully, slowly getting stronger, and she said something to me that I will remember for the rest of my life. She told me Dessa didn't steal my dream. She said Dessa just proved I needed a bigger one. I didn't understand it at first. I was too angry, too raw, but that sentence sat with me for days, weeks. It planted something. Around that same time, I got a message from a woman named Priya, a cosmetic formulator who, it turned out, had worked briefly with Dessa's new brand and left after witnessing some deeply questionable business practices firsthand. She reached out, not to gossip, but because she believed in what my original idea actually stood for. She told me she wasn't there to trash talk anyone, that she was there because she thought I was thinking too small. I told her Dessa had taken my entire business, so I didn't understand how she could call that small. She said that was exactly why I shouldn't build another version of the same business. She told me to build something Dessa could never take, because it was never supposed to be about one brand in the first place. That conversation changed everything. Instead of trying to rebuild the exact brand I had lost, instead of competing jar for jar with the woman who took it from me, I decided to build something structurally different. Not just a skincare line, a platform, an incubator that manufactures and licenses clean, melanin-focused skincare formulas for founders who don't have capital, connections, or a Dessa in their corner to open doors. The exact resources I never had, and the exact resources that made me vulnerable to what happened to me in the first place. I'm not going to pretend this part was glamorous. It wasn't. It was months of no. It was learning, the hard way, about provisional patents, trademarks, and airtight NDAs. Lessons I paid for the most painful way possible, so that no one working with me would ever have to. Then I met Theo, an investor, but a different kind than I was used to encountering. The first thing he ever asked me wasn't about margins or projections. He asked me to forget the pitch deck for a second and tell him what I actually wanted this to become. Nobody had asked me that question in over a year. Not even Dessa, if I'm being fully honest with myself now. 12 months later, we launched. Not one brand, a network of over 30 independent founders, backed by real manufacturing support, real legal protection, and real capital, something that, 3 years earlier, I would have given almost anything to have access to myself. Launch day, I stood backstage at our first Founders Showcase, listening to applause on the other side of a curtain, the exact moment I showed you at the very beginning of this video. I felt something I hadn't felt in over a year. Not revenge, Not vindication, just pride. Quiet, steady pride. I saw Dessa again about 6 months after our launch, at an industry event neither of us expected the other to attend. Her brand was still around, but noticeably smaller, quieter, clearly struggling to keep pace with a market that had moved past the moment of her original press cycle. She walked over to me, and I want to be honest with you, my heart was pounding, but not from fear. She told me, quieter than I'd ever heard her, that what I'd built was incredible, and that she meant it. Then she said something I hadn't expected. She told me she knew she didn't deserve to hear this from me, but that she was sorry, for all of it. I let that sit for a moment before I responded. I told her I believed she was sorry that it cost her something, but that I wasn't sure she was sorry for what it cost me, and I told her I'd made peace with that, for myself, not for her. I promised you 3 answers at the beginning of this video. Here they are. Why did the one person who knew my idea inside and out become the one person I couldn't trust with it? Because proximity gives someone access to your life. It does not give them character. Dessa didn't betray me because she knew my idea. She betrayed me because of a choice she made about what to do with what she knew, a choice that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with who she already was underneath the friendship. What was the one mistake I made, the one thing I should have protected? I confused emotional trust with structural trust. I gave someone my heart, which she had absolutely earned over 11 years, but I also handed her my legal, financial, and intellectual blueprint without a single piece of paper protecting either of us. Love someone fully, but protect your work like it's a separate relationship entirely, because legally, it is. And when I finally saw her again, why did I thank her? Not for what she did. I want to be very clear about that. What she did was wrong, and I will never call it anything else. But losing that version of my dream forced me to build something bigger than the two of us ever imagined over cheap wine in a dorm room. Something that now helps over 30 other founders instead of just one brand. I thanked her because gratitude, in this case, was never about her. It was about who I had to become without her. If you take nothing else from this story, I want you to take this. Betrayal doesn't just take something from you. It shows you exactly what you're capable of rebuilding, if you let it. Protect your dreams, not because you assume the people around you can't be trusted, but because your vision deserves structure, not just love. The two are not the same thing, and you need both. And forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't saying what someone did to you was okay. It's refusing to let them live in your head rent-free while you go build the life they never believed you could build without them. The people who are truly meant to stay in your life will celebrate your growth, even when it's inconvenient for them. The people who leave, or the people who take, when you outgrow them, were only ever meant to be a chapter. Never the whole story. Love people with your whole heart, but never ever hand anyone the only copy of your dream. From a notebook in a dorm room, to a single betrayal, to 30 founders and counting, this is what building something 10 times bigger actually looks like. If you've ever had someone close to you try to shrink your dream, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button so you never miss what we post next. We've got a follow-up video coming, what actually happened to Dessa's brand a year later, and trust me, you're going to want to see it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.